Hello and welcome. This is going to be one of the first ever kind of like character design tutorials I guess I'm doing. I really wanted to kind of take the moment to emphasize the importance of character design whenever you make a comic book, right? So I'm going to be making the comic book from the sketch phase all the way up to completion, all the way until it's self-published, right? So here we have a hero, right? And in order to really create a hero, you need to have reference. And all throughout comic book mediums and all throughout just, the world of literature, you have to realize that everything always is referencing something else, right? The idea of originality isn't really tangible anymore. So I decided to create, choose 4 of my favorite little characters that I really I like design-wise. I like the aura. I think that the vibe of the material, right, the resonating energy that it gives off is really important in terms of selling points. So I just kind of wanted to have the lighthearted, bouncy kind of round aesthetics, right? So I wanted to kind of show off. This is the sketch phase. You have to really block out the human anatomy with just simple shapes, right? You've chosen your reference material. Now you just need to really just lay it out there on the page, right? So my favorite thing to do is just work off from just simple circles. As you can see, all of these characters are literally built from circles, right? So we have to find something to adorn them, right? For example, Deadpool's the little nub on his hat, or the little, spikes on Goku's hair and stuff. So my character will have a little nub. It's just something small to really adorn and decorate the head of the figure, such as Batman's ears, right? You have to think in terms of silhouette whenever you're creating or designing a character. It's the most marketable, most important thing, because when you have them isolated, it really is what the selling point. So here I'm just kind of blocking out a couple of the features of how to draw the human face. Again, it's just simple shapes, and I don't really use a ton of guidelines. I really just kind of you just use a simple cross to really know which direction the face is going towards, right? And whenever I draw like a 3/4 view, right, or a side profile, I just kind of have like a little instance of like the eyelash, or just enough to give them the idea that there's a full human head there, Clearly this character is much bouncier, much more lighthearted, right? Obviously my art style is much more different than I would say for any upcoming artists, right? We all have our own unique art styles, and I think it's good to kind of let it shine. My stuff is really retro, and I kind of like emphasizing the old school marketing, right? Like the old school just billboards and like the Norman Rockwells, right? The Walt Disneys and stuff like that. So clearly I had to have Disney emphasized there as well, and Astro Boy, right? Because they were both very much a big influence, right? Fun fact, Astro Boy's creator was actually highly influenced by the Donald Duck cartoons, like the actual, not only the cartoons, but the Carl Barks comic books. So you guys could literally look at that through Fantagraphics, right? You could read it online and stuff like that, or buy the hard copies. But I think it's fun to kind of look back, not only choose reference for the design, but also reference and do research in terms of storytelling, because you could really build upon the things that people have previously created, right? You could kind of learn from the people who paved the way. Whenever I ink, I kind of want to keep it a consistent deadline all the way through. I might actually draw my characters in a much bulkier, much thicker line than most people are used to, right? Again, it comes back down to aesthetic and personal style. I love stylizing stuff like that. For example, whenever I draw the feet, it needs to be an old school kind of like Mickey Mouse thing. Same with the hands. I just keep it, the fundamental shapes is really what's important. So I just kind of keep it, simple enough for people to understand, oh, it's a hand, right? Nothing too complex, but I don't want it to be too abstract, like for example, things such as Adventure Time or Gumball, which just do like 3 little fingers as like a nub. I kind of like the anatomy of a hand a little bit, so I might kind of give a little bit more of attention to it. But for this instance, it's not really hyper needed. Now remember, whenever you're sketching out your character, don't be scared to just erase things and to try new things and ideas. Whenever you're designing a hero, you have to think about, who is this character? Why is their personality? What is their personality, and how do you want people to respond to them? What do you want people to take away, right? You have to be able to not tell the entire story, but at least tell who they are, right? You have to be able to understand the character from a simple glance, right? So this character here, right, he's called Bubble Boy, and his whole thing is that he's literally a boy made out of bubbles, right? So I kind of draw him similar to the reflections of like Silver Surfer, let's say, and a little bit of like the Mickey Mouse kind of stuff, right? The face kind of looks a little bit like the old Archie, right? The way I stylized noses and stuff. And I want to let you guys know that whenever you draw anatomy, you don't have to draw every muscle, especially because I want Bubble Boy to look soft, and I want him to look not super intimidating, right? I still want him to look like he could defend himself, but I don't want to make him too bulky, right? Sometimes we tend to just over exaggerate the muscles in comic books, which I think isn't really a great thing. We should kind of, make it a little bit more realistic, or at least just allude to the fact that anatomy exists. I'm not really a huge advocate or fan of the Rob Liefeld 90s stuff, like the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man breaking his legs. You know what I mean? Like that stuff, it looks cool, but it kind of tweaks reality a little bit. However, again, to each their own. If it's your style, if that's who you kind of want to emulate or learn from, go right ahead. However, in my case, I want to kind of keep it very simple, very, very, very animation inspired, right? One of the greatest creators is actually the creator of Space Ghost, and his name is Alex Toth. If you guys don't know who this guy is, he's done all of the stuff for Hanna-Barbera cartoons, right? Such as, like Scooby-Doo and stuff like that. But it's probably older stuff, kind of like the Super Friends cartoons and the, what's it called? There's Space Ghost, of course, and then there's what was that? Johnny Quest. If you guys have ever seen Johnny Quest, it literally looks like an old school comic book brought to life. Right, and if you guys know ever seen Venture Bros and stuff like that from Adult Swim, then you clearly know where the inspiration kind of comes from. And here we have just following the ideas of like, yeah, I could shade every little thing, every little muscle, add a whole bunch of detail, or we could save some time and just plot down some solid blacks, right? Solid blacks, it's called spotting blacks, as they call it, is literally just playing with negative space, right? You play with the whites and the blacks and the colors, and you have to find areas to really just carve out solid chunks of black in order to kind of, not only is it simpler to draw, but it's like a selling point in terms of it's more believable, right? It gives the figure more depth, more roundness. Alex Toth was an advocate for less is more, right? Simplifying is way more. And I think there's another key element to this, right? For example, when you're drawing faces, there was Scott McCloud who said, he drew the evolution of the smiley face all the way up to just a normal, real drawing of illustration of a human head, and how we as a reader, not only as a reader, but as an artist and as a writer, we get to, project our emotions more to a blank face, right? Just a stick figure head rather than like a super ultra realistic drawing, because it's just easier, right? It's more cartoony. We get to really play with our imagination when it comes to that. So I like keeping that simplified kind of animation ready aesthetic, right? Besides Alex Toth, one of the greatest illustrators I've ever seen, right, who is literally a master of spotting blacks. He's a master of negative space, right? And it's clearly Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy. Whenever I read one of the first Hellboy comics, I was taken away at what he was able to do with just such simple, solid colors, right? For me, I wasn't a huge fan of the solid colors in comics, but I fell in love with it in terms of, once they started reprinting all of the old stuff. I really wanted to just kind of learn what Mignola did, and what he did the best was just select areas to kind of pinpoint, right? He selected areas to kind of choose where the figures are and which figure needs the most importance in every scene. You have to think in terms of choreography. You have to think in terms of like the actual composition of the piece, how much space there is, what is the main attraction, and what it is you're trying to convey. And when you're designing a hero, for instance, I think it's very important to kind of show off their emotions, their personalities, what you think is important, right? And for the most part, it's their expressive face, right? I love the attention to detail when it comes to expressions. I think that's key to reading comic books, because if everyone just has like a bland reaction, then it's boring. You can see all of these heroes are always smiling. These heroes are always ready to fight danger, head first into trouble. And they're just, they're different in terms of actual characterization. We could have characters that are, wimps. We could have characters that are scared. Or we could have fearless, stuff like that, or villainous, I'll make a follow-up video illustrating the villain, the adversary to Bubble Boy, right? But yeah, whenever we draw the anatomy, we have to give just enough to give the illusion that there's more there, right? And Mignola is a master at that. He would draw these super hyper stylized, like slumped shoulders and thin wrists, but he still managed to portray anatomy and things. Like whenever he would draw a human heart, it would be so simplified but so realistic at the same time, or like the squid tentacles and things like that. So it depends what you think needs the most detail and what doesn't, right? For arms and legs, I tend to just keep it basic, really. And I wanted to kind of have my heroes have the old school underwear over the outfit, kind of like Superman, right? And I wanted to lean into that as a joke. Bubble Boy, he would just look naked if I didn't give him pants. It's like Ben Grimm's The Thing, right? Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's The Thing from Fantastic Four, right? If he doesn't have those little baby blue shorts, then he's gonna look weird. He's gonna look naked, even though he's just a rock monster. I think it kind of humanizes people to wear pants, right? It's more civilized than not to. So I think it's important for your characters to be well dressed, and for their clothing to kind of, again, it shows what their personality is. Bubble Boy is mostly a reflective character, so it's a bit different, and it's just a little trunks to show he's a hero, right? I don't want like a big cape or shoulder pads or any of that, big gloves. That's too much, right? So since my character is very specific and he is a reflective being, I guess, I wanted it to kind of emulate Silver Surfer, right? So whenever I look at the old Jack Kirby stuff, right, the Fantastic Four, right, the Coming of Galactus, if you haven't read that, it's a masterpiece. This like the Galactus trilogy, beautiful. Whenever we see Silver Surfers first appear, he's this alien kind of otherworldly figure, and just the lines and the different kind of squiggles that Jack Kirby would interlay over would just really sell the reflective idea, right? So my guy isn't chrome or metal per se, so I might make my lines a little less sharp and a little more like bubble words, right? Whenever you for those who do graffiti or like who do like lettering, whenever you draw the letters, it's kind of like you do round outlines, and that's kind of what I'm doing, but to my character. I'm thinking of, okay, if this figure is three-dimensional, where exactly would it go, right? This is where his knees are, this is what I want to emphasize, and this is where the light would bounce off. Again, solid blacks are the amazing, just like, it's a tool that's underutilized, right? It really is a good selling point in order to, if again, like just a simple drop shadow underneath him sells the idea of a floor, right? And don't forget to sign your work, by the way. Todd McFarlane put me on to saying to always, whenever I sign my work, I want it to be legible. I want it to be literally my name, so that no one could just sell a random squiggle and say it's mine, so just as a heads up, it's just a tip. now we entered the coloring phase. So whenever we're coloring a hero, we want to be as, selective as possible. We want to be very specific with what we choose. For most of my characters, I end up making them kind of either a solid color or something similar, right? I always end up choosing like less than 3 colors realistically, or like less than 4. It depends really on what kind of character you want to convey. Like if it's some sort of like, alien with a bunch of weird, stuff, or like robots with like wires and things. Again, less is more, right? So the more minimalistic you go, the better it will probably be in the long term. So my characters I just want him to be blue because it just pops automatically. All I did was color him in blue, and look at how amazing that looks in contrast to the whites, right? So I wanted to have just something similar to the old school, just solid blue Captain America and stuff like that, or how the solid purple Hawkeye, stuff like that. Just literally just solid tones. Obviously, I want to have, the iconic monster underwear like the Hulk. I think it works very well, and you have to think in terms of complementary colors and things. Like, okay, well, if my character's blue, if you look on the color wheel, which of the actual colors matches it? Is it the triad colors? Is it tertiary? Is it secondary? Is it primary? It depends where it is, but typically you could go the opposite across the color wheel, or I like just going right beside it so that it looks more complementary. I don't want it looks much nicer, looks much more, they're compatible. So, just the nice neon purple pants. That's iconic. It's loud, it's bright, it's very much comic book inspired, right? These kind of like just psychedelic colors almost. Whenever I'm shading, I don't really want to go overboard. I'm very tired of like the modern comics style of shading where everything is gray. So I want everything to just be very bright and in your face, right? And I just really use the same tones of the color I used for shading. Just kind of overlay it exactly where I think it's needed, so that I could just, sell the idea of, oh, there's this fabric, this is folding right here, this is shiny over there. And that really just sells the drapery. It really makes it feel like there's a whole lot more realistic. Well, my character just, again, he's very specific. So when I'm shading him as a bubble, let's say, he is kind of multicolored. If you ever see a bubble, it's almost like reflected rainbow colors. I wanted to keep it very basic, something I could reproduce 1,000 times, because, if you're making a comic book character, that's the whole point. They have to be good for t-shirts, mugs, whatever. So I want to draw him 1,000 times within the story, I'm going to have to if I'm selling it as a comic. So how can I simplify and still give the same effect? That's a real problem. Most people don't realize you're gonna have to be drawing this dude, and you have to draw him almost exactly the same but different, and you're gonna have to go through all of this character's ranges of emotions and all that kind of stuff. So I really like practicing with my expressions. I really like practicing with my the variety whenever I'm making characters, and I think it's, again, less is more. I'm only using 3 colors, and one of them is white, right? So it's technically just 2 colors. It's just pink and blue, and then just the little highlights really sell the idea, the illusion of, oh, this is a bubble. This is it's like soap. It's like reflective. It's like water material or something, right? And always check underneath to see if it looks better with color or without. Some people color stuff, they take hours coloring, and then sometimes it muddies it. I like using bright, bold primary colors. I do not ever want to use grays, browns, or any of that kind of stuff, because it's just so boring. Not only are you going to be wasting ink when you print it, if I'm using your ink, I'm using all of it. You know what I mean? I'm making the book look as best as possible. I always self-publish my stuff through Amazon, at least for right now. So I love just using every color I have in my toolbox, right? Again, it's not even just about using all of them. It's about knowing when not to use them, right? It's knowing when to kind of retain and when to be smart about it. You could always play with the hue and stuff just to see if you want to give it a different tint or a different vibe, if you want to make it more vibrant or whatever. And you go back and forth till you think it's right. But yeah, here is my character, my Bubble Boy. Bubble Boy is going to be a series that I'm going to be starting. I'm going to really show you guys step by step how it is I make comics. Here's a quick, rundown of everything we've just gone through. Again, it's just about having fun, and it's just about characters that you want to make 1,000 times. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you like, comment, subscribe, put notifications on, and please go check out Junket Part 1, Hidden Worlds Revealed. Thank you. I'll see you guys next time.